My name is Colleen Reynolds, and I have a screen recording going here. As you can see, I've opened up my Adobe Photoshop program, CS6, and I am going to pull in an image. So I've already taken the image with my camera, and there will be a little tutorial on how to take a good image as well. But for now, we'll talk about how to adjust the image once taken. So I'm going to go and find some images that I know I want to work with. So these are the raw photos that I took. So I'll bring in this picture of a painting that I just completed. So the first thing I'll note is that overall the painting kind of has a blue cast. So I took the photograph outside in the evening in the shade, and it tends to have a blue cast. I also note it's not quite level, and it has some extra background information that I don't want to include in my final presentation. So I have to get this image correct. I also want to resize it so that I can put it into a program where if I want to print that, it won't be a digitized photo. But I don't want the image to be so large that it's hard to work with the file. So the 4 adjustments that we're going to do is we're going to remove a color cast. We're going to level. We're going to crop and resize our image and then save off the new file with the name. So those are the things that we're going to accomplish. So let's start with removing this blue color cast. I don't necessarily need it to be brighter or darker. I may need to make those adjustments as well. But I'm going to go to the overall menu bar. I'm working on a Mac, so the menu bar across the top is not actually attached to the program like it is in a PC. But you should have the same pull-down menu. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustments, and then I'm going to come down here to Match Color. And all I'm going to say is I want to neutralize the colors. So you see immediately it took away that blue cast. So if I remove that, you can see the difference in the files. So then I'm going to say OK. So now I'm happy, and I have my painting next to me, and I can compare the color, and it's much more accurate to what I'm actually seeing rather than having that blue cast to it. Okay, the next step is I now want to level the picture because I'm just slightly off skew. So I'm going to come over here to my sidebar, toolbar, and I'm going to hit this little icon that looks like a crosshairs or a level. Crosshair tools, like a mat that'll slide up and down. And then across you'll note that this menu changes a little bit. So now I want to go to this tool to straighten the image. So I've got that tool selected. I'm going to put the crosshairs, if you can see the crosshairs there, at the corner on the upper left. I'm going to click left, and I'm going to hold down and draw that crosshairs over to the upper right. Once I get it nice and level, I'm going to release and see how that straightened out the image and squared it up for me. The next thing I want to do is actually crop the background information out of the file. So I'm going to go back to this crop tool. I'm going to say go ahead and crop that. So now I've got my crop tool. You can see the icon changed what it looks like. So I'm going to put the crosshairs, see where the little crosshairs is. I'm going to start that in the upper left. I'm going to click and hold, and then I'm going to drag down bottom right until I see that my crop has covered. Now look how level and square that painting is. A lot of that was because I took a pretty good source photo. Okay, so once I have the crop, you can see the lines that appear to be moving. Adjusted properly. I'm going to release that, and I'm going to hit return to crop. So you can see now I've removed the color cast. I have leveled the painting so it's nice and squared up, and then I've cropped out the extraneous background information. The last thing I want to do is resize it so that it will not be a huge file, but it will still be a good image for printing if I decide to ultimately print. So I'm going to go back to my image pull down menu, and then I'm going to come to image size. The first thing I want to do is change the resolution to make sure it's 300 pixels per inch, which is what printers need in order to eliminate pixelation in the printing process. So 300 is the minimum pixels per inch for printing standards. But you'll note this makes these other dimensions get really big. So you want to make sure you have all of these boxes checked. You want to constrain the proportions. That means if I change the width, then the height will adjust accordingly. And then you also want to resample the image. So the first step is to change the resolution to pixels per inches. And if you think better in pixels or some other meters or millimeters or picas, you're welcome to change those units by touching on that arrow. So that brings up the drop-down menu. But what we want to do is we want to adjust the longest side to be 1024 pixels. So the longest side is the bigger number. So this is a vertically oriented painting, so I want to pick the height because it's a larger number, and I'm going to change that to 1024. Another common printing level to have a small file but not so small is to make it 1920. You'll notice that when I change the pixels height and width, it also changes the units here on the document size. So now it'll be 300 pixels per inch, but the height, if I'm actually going to really print this out, will be 6.4 inches by 4.3 inches if I put the height at 1920. So you want to put it at either 1024, which is common, or 1920. I'm going to go ahead and make it 1920. So this will reduce the overall file size but still be a good file for printing. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. Right, now I want to save that image in a way that I can remember it. So instead of just going to save, that's just going to replace the name, replace this with my original raw photo. I want to save my raw photo because I might have to go back and make adjustments. I don't ever want to overwrite my raw photo. So I'm going to say save as so that I can save this file as separate from the original raw photo. So I'm going to decide where I'm going to put it. I have a file called Watercolor 2018 that I'm going to put it in, and I want to put in there that I've made it 300 ppi, pixels per inch. And I'm going to save that into the same folder. So I can designate this file as separate from the file that is my raw photo that I brought in directly from my camera, in case I have to go back to the original. And I like to make the quality as high as possible when this JPEG option. So I'm saving it as, you can change this to optimized if you want, or progressive if you want. That just gives you a better image overall. So let's go ahead and say progressive, 3 strands, highest quality image possible, so the maximum quality and a large file. And I'm going to say OK. So now I have a file that's small enough that I can manage it in a big file, but formatted so that it will have the most pixels per inch for printing purposes. And then I'm going to go ahead and close that file. So now I'm going to show you another image that has a different kind of color cast. So this image was taken inside. So outside photographs, if they have a color cast, that tends to be a blue cast. Inside photography, indoor lighting tends to be a yellow cast. But it will do the same process. Go to Image, Adjustments, and then down to Match Color. and click the box for neutralize. You'll notice if you unclick the box how it took away that yellow cast. Because I took that photograph in indoor lighting tends to have a yellow cast to it. I want to neutralize that yellow cast by taking the box out. So now I'm going to say OK. Again, I'm going to go through that process again. I want to first level it, so I'm going to hit my crop tool, then come up to the menu bar that's changed up here, find the straighten tool, put my cursor in the top left where that crosshairs happens, click, hold, and drag over to the other corner as best I can, and then release, and it squares up my photograph. I did a pretty good job when I took the photo. That's always best, to get it as square as possible when you actually take the photograph itself. Alright, now I'm going to do a little bit different method. I'm just going to drag my bars, my crop bars, in on all four corners in order to crop it. So that's another way to do it. And I'm going to go ahead and keep that lower border a little bit longer. So this is an image in my sketchbook. I can decide if I want to go out to the edge of the page, which I think I will, just to show it more of a sketchbook idea, but I want to make sure I get all the background cropped out. Then I'm going to hit enter, and that crops the image for me. The first step is to change the resolution, which is in pixels per inch. Make sure it's in pixels per inch and rather than in centimeters, so we can think like Americans. Then I'm going to find the biggest number in my pixel dimensions, and I'm going to change that to 1920 or to 1024. And notice that it changed the height, the longest side, to 6.4 again, 6.4 inches. I have all my three boxes checked so that it's going to resample the pixels, it's going to constrain my proportions, and it's going to maintain my scale styles. And then I'm going to say OK. Now I'm going to save that image off as a new file, daffodils, yellow daffodils, and I'm going to put 300 ppi on the file name so I know how this one is different from the original raw photo. I'm going to make sure I've got it into the file folder that I want, which is watercolor 2018. That's correct, and I'm going to say save. Now those images are ready to input into my PowerPoint file, and I can expect to get maximum points on my assignment when I turn it in because I've followed all the directions correctly.